You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. That particular night shift at the Pendleton Historical Archive wasn't mine to begin with. Rory, my usual relief, had succumbed to some 24-hour malady, and frankly, the overtime was a lifeline. Funds had evaporated since Clara departed, taking her half and leaving behind a vacuum, both financial and otherwise. So, I found myself the solitary custodian of stillness, wandering halls filled with the hushed relics of lives concluded. The compensation was fair, the routine typically uneventful, just the slow ballet of dust motes dancing under the security lights, settling on displays of faded regimental blues and meticulously arranged Lenape stone points. 3 weeks past, that equilibrium fractured. I can pinpoint the precise instant the mundane curdled into the uncanny. It was the 23-data walkthrough, a methodical circuit verifying closures on the upper floor. Then I registered it, the unmistakable metallic snick of a lock yielding somewhere along the corridor's length. Not the familiar electronic chirp of our security apparatus, but the analog, mechanical turn of antiquated tumblers. My torch carved a trembling path through the stagnant gloom as I advanced toward the source. The Gilded Age gallery, its heavy oak portal, ought to have been secured fast. I'd checked it myself barely an hour prior. Yet now it stood ajar, perhaps 3 inches, exhaling a tendril of unnatural chill into the hallway. An impossibility, given the climate control's rigid insistence on a constant 21 degrees Celsius. With a push, the door swung inward, the soles of my boots protesting slickly against the polished parquet. "Hello? Security presence," I announced, my query bouncing off vitrines, showcasing opulent gowns and dormant jewels from the 1880s. Silence answered, profound and absolute. The motion detectors remained dormant. The monitors, on my last sweep, had shown only empty rooms. Nevertheless, procedure dictated investigation. I conducted a thorough sweep, peering behind every display, probing each shadowed alcove. Nothing disturbed, no compromised windows, no indication of intrusion. I re-secured the door, rattling the brass handle twice to confirm the latch engaged. A temperamental lock, surely. I resolved to file a maintenance ticket come morning. But the anomaly recurred the following night, and the night after that, always hovering around the same late hour, always heralded by that identical, dry click, always originating from the Gilded Age gallery. I began compiling meticulous notes, chronicling each instance. When I broached the subject with the archive director, she offered only a dismissive shrug. "Old structures breathe," she'd countered. "Temperature fluctuations, settling foundations." Her prosaic explanation held water until the previous Tuesday, when the shadow manifested. I was stationed at the security console, navigating paperwork while half watching the monitor array. A flicker of movement on camera 3 snagged my attention, an indistinct shape gliding swiftly between cases of ancestral Puebloan ceramics. By the time my gaze shifted to the actual corridor, visible through the partition glass, emptiness reigned. I rewound the digital feed. The recording showed nothing, a pristine loop devoid of the phantom I'd witnessed. The subsequent evening, I introduced a personal variable, a high-definition camera, my own, equipped with infrared capabilities. I positioned it strategically, aimed at the locus of the prior night's sighting, then commenced my rounds. Upon reviewing the footage later, the screen dissolved into pure static for the precise 2-minute interval during which I believed something had traversed the lens's field of view. That was the prelude to the whispers. Initially, they were whispers attenuated to the very edge of perception, like distant exhalations or the sigh of settling dust. Over ensuing nights, however, they gained coherence, coalescing into distinct articulation. Silas, my name breathed into the darkness. The first time I heard it with clarity, I was deep within the subterranean storage vault, inventorying recent acquisitions. The voice materialized directly behind me, soft, yet undeniable. Feminine, I surmised, young. I pivoted with such velocity that I sent a carton of ceramic shards tumbling. Nothing. Only rows upon rows of steel shelving receding into the tenebrous depths. This is restricted access, I projected, striving for a firmness my pulse belied. Identify yourself, or vacate the premises immediately. The sole reply was the low thrum of the overhead fluorescent tubes. 15 years I've worked security, pulled graveyard shifts, guarding warehouses, vacant office towers, skeletal construction sites. Panic isn't my default state, yet hearing my name invoked in that sepulchral basement raised the fine hairs along my forearms. I began bringing a thermos from home, eschewing the break-room coffee maker situated in the vault. I favored the stairwells over the clanking service elevator, minor adjustments to circumvent solitude in the archive's more profoundly shadowed corners. But the susurrations pursued me. They intensified in frequency, grew more insistent, sometimes brushing against my ear as I secured the main entrance for the night, other times echoing faintly down vacant passages just ahead. Always my name. Always in that same youthful, female timbre. I clung to rationalizations, aging ventilation systems conjuring phantom acoustics, my own mind fabricating phantoms after protracted vigils alone. Then the photographs began to materialize. The first lay face down upon my console when I returned from patrol last Friday. A monochrome print, yellowed at the edges by time's passage. It depicted a young woman clad in Gilded Age attire, posed before the archive building itself. The structure appeared fresher in the image, less weathered, but unmistakably the same edifice. Her gaze met the camera directly, a smile playing on her lips, one hand lifted in a gentle wave. I turned it over, inscribed on the reverse in faded sepia ink, Eleanor Vance, 1888. Vance, the archive's benefactor family. Her formal portrait hung prominently in the main hall, a ubiquitous presence, yet this candid snapshot felt startlingly immediate, vibrantly real. I secreted the photograph within my locked desk drawer, mentioning it to no one. How could I articulate its sudden appearance? That a relic from over a century past had simply manifested on my desk. The next night yielded another, this one resting atop a filing cabinet. The same woman, a different composition. She stood within the archive now, beside a display case still occupying that exact spot today, her smile persistent. The inscription read, Ellie with father's acquisitions, 1889. My off-duty hours became consumed by research. Eleanor Vance, daughter of the archive's founder, Augustus Vance. She had assisted in the cataloging and arrangement of the initial collections. Her life was tragically curtailed by typhoid fever at the tender age of 22. The archive opened its doors to the public 1 year following her demise. More photographs continued their inexplicable appearance, 1 or 2 each night, materializing in locations I had surveyed mere moments before, invariably featuring Eleanor within or near the archive. The dates penned on their backs marched inexorably closer to her death. The whispers, too, amplified, evolving beyond my name. Silas, help. Locate it. I heard this plea distinctly 2 nights ago during my midnight circuit. The voice seemed to emanate from the Gilded Age Gallery. Upon investigating, I discovered another photograph awaiting me, perched atop one of the vitrines. This image captured Eleanor beside a substantial wooden cabinet, fitted with glass doors. Her smile was absent this time. Her expression bore a gravity bordering on apprehension. The reverse noted, "Father's Special Curations, 1890, dated just 2 months prior to her passing." I recognized the cabinet instantly. It remained within the Gilded Age Gallery, though currently empty, serving merely as a period piece. In the photograph, however, its shelves were laden with what appeared to be ledgers and small caskets. Last night represented a stark escalation. Ensconced in the security office, the building's power abruptly failed. Every monitor blinked into blackness simultaneously. Emergency lighting flared to life, bathing the surroundings in an unsettling crimson wash. That's when I heard it. No mere whisper now, but a lucid voice, startlingly proximate. "Silas, please, you must locate it." I nearly bolted from my chair. The voice felt so near I imagined I could feel the attendant coldness of its presence. "Locate what?" I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What is it you're searching for?" "The journal, within the cabinet. He concealed it after I—" The voice attenuated, dissolving into silence. Seconds later, the power surged back, monitors flickering erratically before stabilizing. Another photograph rested upon my desk. The final one I intuited with unnerving certainty. It showed Eleanor confined to a bed, pallid and frail, her illness starkly evident. The date marked on the back was merely 3 days before her death. I sit here now, in the sterile quiet of the security office, transcribing this account while the clock creeps toward midnight. That's the hour the Gilded Age Gallery door invariably unlocks. Tonight, however, I intend to be prepared. My flashlight is charged, my personal camera ready, and I've procured a sturdy pry bar from the maintenance stores. Something lies hidden within that antique cabinet. Something Eleanor requires me to uncover. Her father's special curations. What secrets resided within those volumes and containers? What truth possessed such gravity that her spirit has lingered for over a century, awaiting discovery? The clock has just chimed midnight. Faintly, down the corridor, I registered the familiar snick of the lock releasing. It is time to ascertain what Eleanor Vance needs me to comprehend. Clutching my equipment, I move toward the Gilded Age Gallery. The emergency lights sculpt elongated shadows that writhe with imagined life. A palpable drop in temperature greets me as I approach the gallery door. It stands open, as if in invitation. The cabinet looms, identical to its depiction in Eleanor's photograph, though the glass panes are now filmed with the patina of age. My hands betray a slight tremor as I insert the tip of the pry bar into the seam, dividing the doors. The lock is archaic, likely original to the piece. 3 forceful leverages are required before it surrenders with a splintering crack. The cabinet's interior releases an aroma of desiccated wood and time-settled dust. My flashlight beam illuminates vacant shelves, just as they have always appeared. But as my fingers trace the contours of the back panel, I detect it. A subtle discontinuity near the base, a false backing. The panel dislodges with surprising ease, exposing a hidden recess behind. Within lies an object swaddled in yellowed linen. Gingerly, I retrieve it. A leather-bound volume, unmistakably a journal. The instant my fingertips make contact, the ambient temperature plummets. My exhalations plume white in the frigid air. "Thank you," Eleanor's voice breathes, directly beside me, clearer and more present than ever before. With trembling digits, I open the journal. The first page bears elegant cursive script, dated 1890. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are perusing these words, then I have failed in my duty to shield you. The truth concerning the artifacts, their genuine nature, their provenance, it proved excessively perilous. I believed I could govern it, contain its influence. I was grievously mistaken. Your affliction was no mere fever of nature. It was my culpability entirely. This journal enshrines all I comprehend regarding the collection. Exercise extreme caution in whom you entrust with this knowledge. Certain truths are best left interred. Father." The subsequent pages are dense with meticulous notations, intricate diagrams, and what appear to be ritualistic incantations. Augustus Vance hadn't merely been a collector of historical objects. His pursuits had delved into something far darker, something occult. An icy hand settles upon my shoulder. I whirl around, finding only empty space. The journal feels preternaturally heavy in my grasp, a tangible weight pulling me downward. "Obliterate it!" Eleanor's voice rings with sudden urgency. "Please, it was my demise. It will claim others. Obliterate it now." I retrieve my lighter, a violation of archive regulations, but ingrained habits persist. The journal ignites readily. Azure flames lick hungrily at the brittle pages, releasing an odor that transcends burning paper, something metallic and fundamentally wrong. As the journal combusts, the oppressive cold begins to recede. When the final page crumbles into ash, I sense it, a palpable release, akin to a profound, long-held exhalation finally escaping. "Thank you, Silas." Eleanor's voice is fading now, receding into distance. "Wait," I call into the void. "What comprised the collection? What forces was your father meddling with?" But she has departed. I feel the absence acutely. The air has normalized. The chill spots have vanished. The whispers are extinguished. I meticulously gather the ashes, replace the false panel, and close the cabinet doors as securely as the damaged lock allows. I'll report finding it compromised during my rounds. The remainder of my shift unfolds in profound quietude. No further whispers, no fleeting shadows, no more spectral photographs. Yet my thoughts incessantly return to the incinerated journal, to the nature of Augustus Vance's collection, to the true cause of Eleanor's death. Certain truths are best left interred, he had inscribed. Perhaps he was correct. I've submitted my resignation, effective in 2 weeks. The archive director expressed disappointment but offered understanding. Nocturnal security isn't suited for everyone, she remarked, if only she grasped the entirety of it. I retain the photographs of Eleanor. They reside in a box beneath my bed. Occasionally, I retrieve them, studying her smile, her wave, captured moments frozen against time's current. I ponder if she has finally found solace now that her father's perilous secrets have been reduced to ash. Yet sometimes, late at night in the solitude of my own apartment, I fancy I still perceive whispers. Not Eleanor's voice any longer. Something different, something deeper, more ancient. And I find myself wondering, did we truly eradicate all the secrets? Or do further enigmas lie dormant within the Pendleton archive, awaiting their own discovery? I won't remain to uncover the answer. Let another soul inherit the night watch. Some mysteries ought to remain inviolate. A dull concussion shuddered through the floorboards overhead, arresting my hand where it floated, thumb poised above the television's mute button. Midnight had bled well into the new day, and the house held only myself, or so the logic dictated. Leo and Maya, the children entrusted to my care, slept soundly upstairs, cocooned in dreams, their parents adrift in the city until dawn. What, then, had produced that sound, heavy and distinct? I silenced the television's drone, plunging the living room into a thick quiet. My hearing strained against the stillness. An eternity seemed to pass, measured in heartbeats, just as the rational part of my mind began smoothing over the incident, dismissing it as house-settling groans. It came again, an undeniable thump, followed this time by a dry, skittering rasp, like claws on old wood. A cold bloom of adrenaline opened in my chest. Nothing, surely. Old timbers sighed and shifted, didn't they? Yet a persistent whisper coiled in my thoughts. Intruder? Danger? The children? A tremor ran through me as I pushed myself off the plush sofa. A check was necessary, purely for reassurance. My trajectory towards the staircase carried my gaze past the kitchen counter, where the knife block stood sentinel. A flicker of hesitation, then impulse took over. My fingers closed around the handle of the largest chef's knife, its weight a cold, inadequate comfort. Prudence or paranoia? The stairs, relics of another century, groaned their ancient protest beneath my sneakers, each step amplifying the silence into something brittle. I paused on the landing, listening intently. The scratching intensified, a frantic scrabbling now, localized unerringly towards the attic. First, the children, peeking into their respective rooms, confirmed their peaceful slumber, oblivious to the knot tightening in my stomach. Relief warred with residual dread. My attention swung to the unassuming door at the hallway's terminus, the attic access. Drawing nearer, the scratching reached a fever pitch. Sweat slicked my palm, loosening my grip on the knife. This felt profoundly wrong. Police intervention, not a solo confrontation armed with cutlery and burgeoning panic, was the sensible path. But what if it was merely squirrels, a trapped bird? The potential embarrassment of a false alarm held me captive, and abandoning Leo and Maya while I waited outside felt unthinkable. Drawing a ragged breath, I reached for the tarnished brass knob. It yielded without resistance, swinging inward on complaining hinges to expose a gullet of ascending darkness. The scratching abruptly ceased. Silence slammed back, amplifying the frantic drumming in my ears. "Hello?" My voice emerged, a thin, wavering thread. "Is anyone up there?" Only the profound hush of the old house answered. My fingers fumbled along the wall, finding the switch. A naked bulb sputtered reluctantly to life, casting skeletal shadows across a landscape of forgotten things. Boxes towered like derelict monoliths, shrouded furniture hunched in the gloom, a labyrinth of concealment. Clutching the knife like a holy symbol, I began the ascent. Each tread of the narrow wooden steps felt precarious, eternal. Reaching the dusty floor above, my eyes scanned the cluttered expanse, searching for dissonance, for movement. Nothing overtly disturbed the tableau of neglect. But then, this was terra incognita. An interloper could lurk behind any forgotten armoire, any teetering stack of cartons. "If you're here, you need to leave," I announced, striving for an authority I didn't possess. "I've called the police." A necessary fiction, perhaps. Still, only silence. Perhaps it was imagination, amplified by solitude and the house's nocturnal symphony. Feeling a flush of foolishness creep up my neck, yet still prickling with unease, I turned to retreat. A flicker, peripheral, indistinct. I spun back, knife extended. There, sequestered in the attic's furthest reach, a mound of cardboard cartons trembled. My breath hitched. No rodent caused that. "I see you," I whispered, the sound barely audible. "Come out, now!" A tense moment stretched. Then, impossibly, the pile didn't disgorge an occupant. The pile became the occupant. Cardboard shifted, tape stretched, rising, assembling into an unnervingly tall silhouette. A patchwork figure of packing materials and forgotten deliveries took shape. Where a face should have been, a crude visage stared back, stark circles for eyes, a jagged slash of a mouth, rendered in thick black marker. A scream built in my throat, but died soundlessly. The entity lurched forward, its gait disjointed, alien. The knife slipped from my nerveless grasp, clattering onto the floorboards. "No!" I gasped, the word tearing free. "Not real. You can't be." The construct paused, tilting its improbable head. Then, fracturing the impossible silence, it spoke. The voice was a rustle, like dry leaves stirred by wind, seeming to emanate from the very air around me. "Real enough," it rasped. "Real enough to be lonely." I blinked, processing the absurdity. "Lonely?" The figure nodded, a motion that sent ripples through its cardboard torso. "So long," it whispered. "So long, waiting here, watching, wishing." Its voice held a strange, hollow resonance. For a friend. Fear began to recede, replaced by a profound bewilderment. This thing radiated not menace, but a desolate solitude. "What are you?" The question escaped before conscious thought could censor it. It shuffled its makeshift feet, a bizarrely human gesture. "Don't know," the papery voice admitted. "Something else. Before, long ago. Now, just this." An involuntary wave of empathy washed over me, though caution remained. "How long have you been here?" "Years pile up like the dust," it replied. "Families come, families go. They don't look up, they don't hear." My heart ached with a strange pity for this impossible creature, secreted away in the rafters. Why reveal yourself now? To me? The marker-drawn mouth seemed to quirk into a semblance of a smile. "You," it rustled. "You heard. You listened. You came." Before I could formulate a response, sounds drifted up from below. The distinct click of a key in the front door, muffled voices calling out. The parents, home early. Panic surged, cold and sharp. How could this scene ever be explained? Madness? Hallucinations? I turned back to the creature, intending to... what? Urge it to vanish. But it was already receding, collapsing back into the jumble, melting into the mundane clutter from which it had coalesced. "Wait," I found myself saying, strangely reluctant for it to disappear. It paused, its simple drawn eyes seeming to hold an unexpected depth. "Thank you," it whispered, the sound barely there. "Foreseeing, listening, will remember." And then it was gone, utterly indistinguishable from the surrounding detritus. I stood frozen, the reality of the encounter warring with disbelief. Had sleep claimed me on the sofa? Was this a waking dream, born of fatigue and isolation? "Cora, you here?" The mother's voice, closer now, shattered the spell. Scrambling, I retrieved the fallen knife, hurried down the narrow stairs, pulling the attic door shut behind me, sealing the impossible away. I met them in the upstairs hall, forcing my features into a mask of normalcy. "Hi! Wow, you're back early." Their event, they explained, had concluded ahead of schedule. As I gathered my coat and bag, my gaze kept straying towards the attic door, now just an ordinary painted panel, closed, silent, betraying nothing. The drive home was a surreal journey through familiar streets that now felt alien. Part of my mind desperately sought rational explanations. Exhaustion, shadows playing tricks, but a deeper conviction solidified with each passing mile. It had been real. Thoughts swirled around the cardboard entity, its origins, its solitary existence. Were there others hidden in the unvisited corners of the world? And the unavoidable question, what might happen during my next babysitting shift? One certainty emerged. The sight of stacked boxes would forever carry a different weight. And perhaps, just perhaps, the notion of volunteering to clear out that dusty attic held a strange new appeal. Everyone, after all, deserved connection, even creatures born of loneliness and discarded things. Pulling into my own driveway, an unexpected smile touched my lips. The world, I suspected, was infinitely stranger, more layered, and more astonishing than I had ever conceived, and I felt a nascent eagerness to listen for its other hidden whispers. The rain arrived as a percussive drumming against the shingles overhead, a relentless cadence my own frantic heartbeat struggled to match. My palms grew slick, fingers trembling slightly. Days I had waited, listening for this very downpour, yearning for the reappearance of the prince. They materialized only with the rain, spectral visitors in the attic dust, defying every rational thought I possessed. I recall the inaugural night, drawn upwards by an insistent, rhythmic dripping that spoke of inconvenient leaks. The attic air hung thick with neglect. Yet, instead of pooling water, I found damp impressions staining the thick dust. Bare feet. They commenced inexplicably in the very heart of the floor, charting a deliberate course toward the tall gable window before simply ceasing at the sill. No trace beyond. An old rag served poorly to smudge them. The prints, smaller than my own, yet undeniably adult, marked an uneven gait, steps placed with a hesitant care that suggested stealth. I scanned the rafters, the floorboards, seeking the source. A breach in the roof, a seepage. Nothing. The attic remained bone dry, save for the precise shapes beneath my gaze. Islands of moisture in an ocean of dust. Sunlight the following day painted a different scene. The dust lay undisturbed, the footprints vanished. No lingering dampness, no warped wood near the solid window frame. All appeared sound, untouched. Imagination, I reasoned. Perhaps I'd tracked something in myself, though my feet hadn't left my shoes. A trick of shadow and anxiety. A rainless week bled into the next. Then clouds gathered, pregnant and bruised, unleashing their burden near midnight. Flashlight clutched tight. I ascended the narrow stairs, breath catching high in my chest, muscles coiled with apprehension. Pushing open the attic door, I swept the light's beam across the familiar gloom. They had returned. Identical form, dimension, trajectory, originating mid-floor, terminating at the window. My light interrogated the central beam, probed the shadowed corners. No betraying glint of water, no telltale drip. Only the footprints held the rain's chill. Kneeling, I pressed my hand to the wood nearby. Dry, utterly dry, except where those shapes lay pressed into the dust. I traced their path, heart hammering against my ribs, a pressure building behind my eyes. Each print was distinct, the curve of every toe delineated. Brushing a finger across one confirmed its dampness, the cold moisture clinging to my skin. Wiping my hand absently on my jeans, I edged nearer the window where the trail ended abruptly. Leaning toward the glass, I peered into the tempestuous dark. Wind flung droplets against my face. A cold slap. A sudden thump resonated from above, a shifting weight upon the roof. Craning my neck, I angled my head out into the downpour, searching for a loose shingle, anything. That's when I saw it. A silhouette against the turbulent sky, crouched near the roof's far edge. A figure, shoulders hunched, spine unnaturally bowed, head canted forward as if contemplating the distant, rain-blurred city lights. I froze, one hand gripping the sill, the other aiming the wavering beam of the flashlight. A flicker of motion, impossibly quick, and it slid beyond the light's reach. No face glimpsed, no detail discerned. A profound weakness invaded my limbs. My throat felt like sandpaper. Retracting my head, I stood trembling by the window for long moments. The urge to force the sash higher, to clamber out onto the slick incline, warred with a primal fear of falling. The rain hammered down. I secured the window latch, an absurdity given it was already locked, and stood listening to the storm, trying to piece together the impossible. How could anyone ascend the sheer walls? The gutters were ancient, brittle. Back beside the prints, I searched for any deviation, any clue. Nothing. Sleep that night was a shallow, haunted affair, dominated by the image of that hunched form swallowed by darkness. Morning light revealed nothing amiss outside. A circuit of the house showed undisturbed ground, unbroken branches. The roof, viewed from below, looked benignly normal. Upstairs, the attic was once again merely dusty and dry. As if defying the memory itself, I swept the floorboards clean, erasing all trace, preparing a blank slate for the next inevitable storm. Days dripped by, schemes formed and dissolved, cameras I couldn't afford, motion sensors of dubious utility. A restlessness took root. Gathering clouds became omens. Distant thunder sparked a volatile mix of dread and compulsive curiosity. I had to apprehend whatever or whoever left those calling cards. I needed to see it, truly see it. Eventually, the familiar prelude, thunder rattling the window panes as I sat below and saw a deep, steadying breath, flashlight in hand, and the climb began anew, shoulders tightening with each upward step. The attic door swung inward, releasing a faint, damp earth smell. I flicked the switch. The bare bulb cast weak yellow light, and there they were, same origin, same destination. I followed them, placing my own feet carefully beside the impressions. Crouching, I touched one. Cold. A disquiet settled in my gut. Then, a distinct scraping sound from overhead, startling me into a jump, my grip spasming on the flashlight. My gaze shot to the rafters. The noise seemed directly above. Decision crystallized. I strode to the window, unlatched it, wrestled the sash upward, propping it open with the discarded wood scrap. Wind drove rain inside, spattering the floor behind me. Leaning out, bracing against the frame, I felt the shingles slick beneath my potential grasp. Thrusting my upper body into the deluge, my shirt instantly sodden, rain stinging my eyes, I scanned left, only wet roof dissolving into blackness. Then right, a faint shape materialized at the roof's peak. The same stooped figure, seemingly absorbed in the distant view. No face visible, no sound of breathing, nothing recognizably human emanated from it. "Who's there?" The words tore from my throat, thin and shaky against the wind's howl. My voice seemed to hang, then dissipate. The figure shifted, a subtle adjustment. "Hello?" Only the rain answered. Gritting my teeth, I pulled back inside, wiping water from my neck. Answers. I needed them. From a dusty trunk, I retrieved old rubber boots and a worn, waterproof jacket. Back at the window, I levered myself out. My feet skidded precariously on the wet shingles. Slowly, painstakingly, I began moving toward the peak, the wind buffeting me, rain drumming against the hood. My hands shook, my heart felt dangerously overtaxed. Nearing the apex, I saw the figure remained crouched low, knees nearly touching the roof. It offered no acknowledgement of my approach. "What are you doing?" I yelled again. Silence, save for the storm. Its shoulders rose and fell, suggesting respiration, but it remained facing away. My legs trembled violently. Water seeped into my boots. Another cautious step, then my foot lost purchase. A strangled grunt escaped me as I dropped heavily to my knees, scraping my palm raw on the abrasive surface. Wincing, I looked up. The figure was gone, vanished. I scanned the roofline, the darkness below. A faint sound, perhaps behind me? I spun, nearly losing balance again. Nothing. The roof was too treacherous, the night too wild. Defeated, I crawled back to the window, clothes plastered to my skin, fingers and toes numb. Scrambling inside, I slammed the window shut, utterly spent, frustration a bitter taste in my mouth. The following morning brought the familiar routine, checking locks, examining the roof from below, finding no signs of intrusion, no damage. The attic window remained secured from within. Had I hallucinated the entire rooftop encounter? But the footprints had been undeniably real, glistening under the bulb. I resolved, somewhat foolishly, to barricade the attic door with a heavy armchair next time, a flimsy defense against the inexplicable. A long, dry spell settled in. A fragile calm returned, yet every gray sky sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. This tension in my own home felt corrosive. I occupied myself clearing clutter in the attic, sorting boxes, seeking any anomaly, any hidden structural flaw. The floorboards seemed sound, the walls intact, the window stubbornly normal. One clear afternoon, I even ventured onto the roof myself, carefully traversing its expanse, searching for hidden hatches, loose vents, anything. Nothing. No concealed access, no plausible hiding spot. The thought, previously dismissed, resurfaced. Was it even human? The notion coiled uncomfortably in my gut. I craved rationality. Then, inevitably, the night sky wept again. Rain lashed the glass, my chest constricted. Walking to the attic door, I moved the chair aside and turned the knob. The house groaned under the wind's assault. Light flickered on. The prints lay waiting, gleaming wetly. I approached, halting at the first one, comparing it to my own sock-clad foot. The size difference was apparent, yet not childlike. Narrow, the toes pressed tightly together, the heel sharply defined. Squatting, I dipped a finger into the collected water. Cold. My hand trembled uncontrollably. A low groan emanated from the rafters above. I froze, glancing toward the window. In the dark glass, I saw my own reflection, the dim attic behind me. And something else? A flicker of movement in the periphery of the reflection? I whipped my head around. Empty space. Darkness pressed in. My muscles locked, my focus narrowed. Standing abruptly, resolve hardening within me, I marched directly to the window and threw it open. Rain sprayed my face, my shirt. Sticking my head out, I scanned the roof. There, perched near the peak, immobile, gaze fixed on the horizon, shoulders slumped, utterly still. I shouted, my voice raw. The figure didn't react. An overwhelming compulsion surged, to confront it, to break the silence, to finally see if it possessed a face, a voice, a reason for its aqueous trail. Leaving the window gaping, I climbed out once more. Rain blinded me, coated my lips. My jacket became a heavy, sodden shroud. On hands and knees, I crawled across the slick expanse, heart pounding, arms protesting. Halfway to the peak, I paused, lifting my head. The figure hadn't stirred. Steeling myself, I crept closer, shouting again. Nothing. I attempted to rise, but the shingles offered no purchase. Staying low, I closed the distance until perhaps 6 feet separated us. Details sharpened slightly. The narrow set of the shoulders, a long neck supporting the forward-tilted head. The skin on its visible arms seemed pallid, though distorted by shadow and rain. Still, no face. My mouth was paradoxically dry amidst the downpour. Suddenly, with startling fluidity, the figure straightened. It rose, turning its head fractionally toward me. For an instant, I thought I registered 2 deep, dark pools, where eyes should be. But the impression was fleeting, uncertain. Then, it crouched low and launched itself over the peak of the roof. A scrape, a soft thud from the other side, and silence. Ignoring the sting in my scraped knees, I scrambled forward. Reaching the apex, I peered down. The backyard lay empty, drenched and dark. Neighboring houses were lightless voids. The rain continued its indifferent descent. No sign of the figure on the ground, no trace of its passage. I remained there a minute, maybe longer, breath tearing through my lungs, chest aching. My clothes were leaden with water. My knees throbbed. Turning, I crawled laboriously back to the window, tumbled inside, and collapsed onto the attic floor, water pooling around me. I sat there, shivering, staring at the footprints that still marked the path to the window. My mind raced, grasping for purchase, finding none. No logic could contain what I had witnessed. Eventually, I pushed myself up, closed the window, and used an old cloth to sop up the water from the floorboards. The footprints lingered, faint stains, until I meticulously dried each one. Hours later, the storm subsided, leaving behind a profound quiet. The next day dawned clear. The attic was undisturbed. Everything returned to a semblance of normal, except for the persistent unease that now permeated my home. The figure's movement, that swift, soundless vanishing act, it wasn't natural. I remain in this house. Each forecast predicting rain triggers the familiar knot of tension deep in my stomach. I ascend the stairs. I turn on the light. I search the dust. Sometimes the prints are there. Sometimes the floor remains unmarked. When they appear, I go to the window. Invariably, I see it. The hunched silhouette on the roofline, gazing outward. It never speaks. It never ventures closer. It simply leaves its wet signature and dissolves into the night. Moving feels like surrender, yet staying feels like madness. Part of me still clings to the hope of understanding, of confrontation, but proximity only ever leads to its disappearance. I don't know its intent, only the tightening grip of fear in my own muscles whenever it manifests. Relaxation comes only when the storm passes. A cheap camera installed in the attic captures nothing but the inexplicable appearance of the damp prints themselves, water droplets forming on the lens as if condensing from the air. It never records a figure. So, I coexist with the enigma. I watch the skies. When the first drops spatter against the roof, my pulse accelerates. I climb the stairs, open the door, sweep my light across the floor. The footprints materialize, leading, always leading, to the window. I approach. I look out. I find the shape crouched against the dark sky, contemplating the horizon. And I wait, watching it, until it chooses its moment to leap or fade, leaving me alone once more with the rhythm of the rain and the inexplicable marks upon my attic floor. The missive arrived under a pewter Thursday sky. Stark white against the usual junk mail tide, the envelope bore Silas's address, starkly typed, yet offered no clue to its origin, no sender's sigil. A prickle of unease, odd for such a mundane object, accompanied the tearing open. Inside, vacancy. A single sheet, heavy stock, utterly unmarked. He held it aloft, a pale rectangle against the weary afternoon light, traced its deckled edges, felt the faint grain beneath his thumb. Nothing. Some juvenile jest, perhaps. With a shrug that didn't quite settle his nerves, he tossed the envelope onto the scarred pine of the kitchen table, the blank page beside it, an inert question mark in his peripheral vision. The day unwound, ordinary threads pulling him away from the small anomaly. Later, twilight bled through the window panes, pooling in the corners of the living room. The overhead fixture, prone to epileptic fits, remained dark. A lone candle cast flickering amber onto the table, where the envelope and its stark companion lay. An idle impulse, born of shadow and stillness, made Silas retrieve the blank sheet. He held it near the candle's wavering halo, a casual gesture at first. Warmth bloomed against his knuckles, then something impossible. Faint, charcoal lines spiderwebbed across the surface, coalescing like ink bled through unseen strata. Black script unfurled, slow, deliberate. Leaning closer, heart suddenly alert, he strained to decipher the nascent message. A fragment surfaced. Something concerning Vigil, concerning him, before the heat-born words dissolved back into the paper's void. A strange tremor seized his chest, less panic than a sudden internal displacement. He extinguished the flame with a sharp puff, the scent of wax and smoke acrid in the sudden dark. His pulse hammered against his ribs. What specter had the flame summoned? Under the steady glare of a lamp, later before the bathroom mirror's cold reflection, the paper remained stubbornly blank, immaculate. Only the candle's kiss seemed to unlock its secret. Sleep felt distant, irrelevant. A forced meal, the television's hollow chatter, distractions failed. Drawn back to the table, he relit the wick. Again the heat coaxed forth spectral glyphs, fainter this time. He held his breath, eyes narrowed. A prohibition seemed to form. Refrain from, then vanished like smoke. A knot tightened in his neck, his jaw clamping involuntarily. A third attempt, the paper flirting dangerously close to the flame's hungry tip, yielded only disjointed pronouncements. Refrain from, I exist, you. Each syllable a phantom, appearing only to retreat. Tension radiated through his shoulders. A subtle vibration started in his legs. Defeated, he surrendered to the night. Daylight offered a flimsy shield. Work, routine, a solitary supper. Silas performed normalcy, a thin veneer over the burgeoning obsession. He was lying to himself. The blank page exerted a gravitational pull. Nightfall found him again at the table. The house surrendered to darkness save for the candle's solitary vigil. Silence pressed in, amplifying the soft cadence of his own breath. He raised the paper. The cryptic script flickered, too swift for comprehension. He experimented, tilting the page, varying the distance, a frustrating dance with elusive meaning. The paper grew strangely warm, yet a contradictory chill traced his spine. His palm filmed with sweat. He wiped it absently on his trousers. Then, sound intruded. Not the house settling, not the wind's moan, but something finer, more insidious. Whispers, faint susurrations breathed from the room's shadowed periphery. Silas froze, breath caught high in his throat. A slow scan revealed only familiar emptiness, yet the sibilant chorus persisted, directionless, unintelligible. The sound of air forced through unseen impediments. The fine hairs on his arms lifted. His heart became a frantic drum against his ribs. His head felt strangely buoyant. Calm, he commanded himself, reaching again for the paper, hand trembling slightly. The flame licked, letters flared. Do not disregard. Then winked out. He gasped, and the whispering swelled, gaining an edge, an undercurrent of malice, punctuated by a dry hiss. Lowering the page, his voice a reedy tremor, he asked the shadows, "Who is present?" Only the ceaseless, formless murmuring answered. His stomach coiled, cool sweat beaded on his brow. A surge of defiance propelled him up. He prowled the room, yanking back curtains, rattling window latches. Futile. The whispers ebbed and flowed, but never ceased, never resolved into language. An hour bled away before exhaustion claimed him. He quenched the candle, retreating to bed. Though sleep offered little refuge, punctuated by jolts of wakefulness, sweat-soaked sheets, and ragged breathing. The third night, Silas armed himself with technology. His phone rested on the table, its lens aimed, its microphone active. A digital witness. The candle flame, centered, seemed almost ceremonial. He tried to steady the tremor in his hand as he lifted the deceptively simple paper. Again, the fiery baptism conjured the script. "Do not disregard this caution." Then, more chillingly, "My gaze is upon you." The words fled. A sharp exhale escaped him, and instantly the whispering returned, closer now, seeming to emanate from the empty air directly behind his chair. He spun around, nothing but shadows. His phone's microphone indicator showed only ambient hiss. He tried once more, concentrating fiercely. This time, a longer phrase burned itself onto his retina before retracting. "Do not disregard this caution. My gaze is upon you. Attempt no escape. Your location is known." A brutal fist clenched around his heart. Cold sweat traced a path down his spine. His hands shook violently, the paper nearly slipping from his grasp into the flame. The whispers intensified, swirling, a vortex of sibilant sound. He felt an unmistakable pressure, a fleeting brush against his sleeve. He flinched, looked, empty air. With a choked cry, he slammed his palm over the candle, plunging the room into darkness, simultaneously flicking the overhead light switch. Silence crashed down. The room snapped back into mundane focus. He snatched up the phone. The video showed only him, pale and tense, holding a blank sheet. The audio captured his breathing, the candle's faint crackle, but nothing more. No whispers, no spectral pronouncements. Frustration warred with a profound unease. He knew what he'd seen, what he'd heard. His pulse throbbed erratically. His stomach churned. His legs felt unreliable as he pushed himself up to pace, a frantic energy driving him through the house, flinging open closet doors, peering behind furniture, convinced of an intruder. The house remained stubbornly silent, empty. Night 4. Silas arranged a trinity of candles, hoping their combined light might pin the elusive script. He waited until the deepest hour, the house utterly still. The three flames cast a nervous ballet of shadows. He raised the paper. Paradoxically, the letters seemed to flicker faster, more ephemeral than ever. Desperate, he tried speaking the words aloud as they surfaced, hoping to anchor them. "Do not disregard this caution. My gaze is upon you. Attempt no escape. Your location is known. I know what you..." And they dissolved mid-thought. A palpable chill permeated the air. His breath plumed faintly, his neck locked with tension. The whispering returned, louder, sharper, and this time, fragmented words pierced the susurrus. "Heed." A different voice, dry as dust. "Remain." He felt it then, an undeniable presence at his back, a warmth like stale breath grazing his nape. He jerked around. Void, yet the air thickened with a faint, unpleasant odor, musty, like old clothes and unwashed bodies. He looked back at the paper, blank, utterly blank. He lowered it slowly. The whispers continued their insidious chorus. "What is your desire?" he croaked, the words scraping his throat. The candle flames leaped and convulsed as if in a gale, threatening extinction. The murmuring intensified. His palms grew slick, his stomach roiled. A fine tremor shook his entire frame. As he pushed himself to stand, something snagged the fabric of his shirt, a distinct, brief tug. He stumbled back, nearly upending the table. The candles guttered but held. "Cease!" he yelled, the sound raw in the charged silence. Abruptly, the whispering receded, faded, leaving only the ragged sound of his own breathing. He slammed on the overhead light. The sudden glare rendered the room stark, diminished. Silence pressed down, heavy and suffocating. He felt light-headed. Sleep was unthinkable. He retreated to the sofa, bathing the house in artificial light, the letter placed on the coffee table before him, an innocuous sheet of white paper holding unfathomable menace. Should he destroy it? Burn it? The impulse warred with a deeper fear. That disposal might provoke something worse. He kept vigil through the long hours, staring at the paper, every creak of the floorboards, every tap of branch against glass, sending his heart into overdrive. Another night, another variation. Silas retrieved a squat vanilla candle from the bathroom, its scent cloying in the tense air. He lit it, the flame burning low and even. He presented the paper. Fragments materialized, brief and taunting. "Do not disregard. My eye is on you. Nowhere to conceal. You cannot. Gone." The whispering began, but subtly altered, softer, a sibilant hiss inches from his ear, like secrets shared through clenched teeth. His chest constricted, stealing his breath. Forcing a measure of calm he didn't feel, he spoke to the unseen presence. "I am here," he said, his voice tight. "I perceive your message. What is required?" A pause hung in the air, dense with anticipation. Then, a single word breathed against his hearing, faint but absolute. "Submit." A jolt, cold and electric, shot down his spine. His eyes stung. He fought to remain still, wiping a bead of sweat that tracked down his temple. He persisted, maneuvering the paper with painstaking slowness, trying to capture the entirety of the volatile text. It was useless. Phrases ignited and died. "Do not disregard. I know your intent," leaving only menace and incompletion. His mounting frustration seemed to fuel the whispers. They intensified with each failed attempt, swirling, pressing in from all sides, a suffocating miasma of sound. He felt ensnared. His throat was parchment dry. His hands trembled so badly that the paper dipped perilously close to the flame. He snatched it back with a gasp. A pattern emerged. The whispers commenced precisely. After. He deciphered a fragment, as if a guardian intelligence permitted glimpses, but forbade full understanding, preferring terror over revelation. He experimented with distance, approaching the flame cautiously, retreating the instant letters formed. Futile. With a strangled cry of rage, he slammed his fist onto the table. The whispers surged. He gritted his teeth, swallowing the urge to scream. His body ached with accumulated tension, his neck a rigid column, his heart battering his ribs until his chest hurt. After countless variations, the experiment ceased. No more recordings, no more arrays of candles, just Silas, the single flame, and the malevolent paper. Night after night, he enacted the ritual, forcing himself into the crucible of fear. Each session unfolded identically. The teasing glimpses of text, the immediate eruption of whispers that thickened the air and stole his breath. Exhaustion etched itself onto his face. His eyes were perpetually bloodshot, his hands afflicted with a tremor that persisted even in daylight. Food held no appeal. Every sound became a potential threat, every shadow a lurking presence. He checked the door locks obsessively. Lying in bed, the feeling of being observed, of quiet respiration near his pillow became a nightly companion. The full message remained fractured, unknowable. He possessed only shards. Do not disregard this caution. My gaze is upon you. Attempt no escape. Your location is known. I know your actions. There is no evasion. Submit. This was the terrible sum of his efforts. Each attempt left him vibrating with adrenaline and dread. The whispers were constant attendants to the ritual. He finally understood. The letter wasn't meant to be fully read. It was an instrument of torment, a puzzle designed only to inflict fear and weariness. One last time, he told himself this as he sat again in the oppressive dark, the candle's single eye watching him. He raised the paper, deciphered the familiar, fleeting words. They vanished. The whispers coiled around him instantly, raising gooseflesh, tightening his muscles, making his breath hitch. His heart hammered, a frantic pulse echoing in his ears. The voices climbed in pitch and volume. "Enough!" he roared, the sound tearing from his throat. "Stop this!" They paid no heed. With a surge of desperate finality, he seized the paper, crumpled it fiercely, shoved it back into its plain white sheath. Leaving the candle burning like a disregarded prayer, he turned and walked rapidly from the room. The moment he crossed the threshold, the whispering ceased, as if he had stepped out of a localized anomaly, a pocket universe woven from paper, flame, and fear. He locked the violated letter away in a sturdy desk drawer. Sometimes, late at night, standing near that drawer in the dark, he thinks he hears it, a faint residual echo of those sibilant voices. He doesn't investigate. He keeps the lights burning brightly now, avoids candles altogether. He tries to ignore the faint, persistent tension that seems to have soaked into the very walls of his home. Who dispatched the message? For what purpose? Answers remain elusive, perhaps non-existent. He knows only this. Every attempt to grasp the meaning brought only deeper fear, the chilling chorus of unseen mouths, and zero solace. Now, he cultivates uncertainty. It is a meager shield, yet preferable to the alternative, standing perpetually in the dark, slick with sweat, trembling, besieged by voices he cannot locate, and a message he cannot decipher. The full text may remain forever hidden, the letter forever entombed in his drawer, but he will never again approach it with fire. That, he understands, is the only choice compatible with survival, the only path away from madness. The thunder that first night, it resonates still, a physical concussion against the window panes, each lightning strike a jolt deep in my belly. I was adrift on my Uncle Silas's land, sole custodian of his horses and the sentinel of a particular tool shed. Trouble wasn't on the itinerary. I'd been weaned on the quiet gospel of rural monotony. Feed the animals, endure some flickering television, sink into sleep. The script, however, veered sharply off course. Silas's property lies sequestered, a mile removed from the asphalt artery of the main road. A long gravel drive announces arrivals with a gritty fanfare under tires. To one side sprawls a pasture where equine shapes drift. The other is bordered by a dense stand of trees and ragged scrub. The timber shed, tucked behind the stable near the property's edge, is a humble affair of weathered planks, its interior illuminated by a single naked bulb suspended from the rafters. Silas had impressed upon me the necessity of its constant security, demonstrating the workings of a stout combination padlock, how to thread the shackle through the door hasp, and secure it to the anchored chain. A nightly check before bed. This was my sworn duty. That first evening, I obeyed. Just before the sun bled into the hills, I hauled hay bales from storage into the stable's dim interior. The horses, placid giants, swished their tails, their soft snorts punctuating the quiet. I inspected their water troughs, topping them off with a length of garden hose. Sunset painted the descending light gold. The air, thick from a day of simmering heat, promised release. Already, thunderheads bruised the horizon. I recall glancing towards the shed then, its silhouette stark against the burgeoning twilight. I swung open its door, confirmed the light switch was down, off, and secured the heavy brass lock, testing its purchase with several firm tugs. It held fast. A small satisfaction settled in me. Back at the house, a modest structure flanked by weathered rocking chairs on a small porch, the front door groaned a welcome. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of disuse, a musty stillness. I deposited my bag in the spare room, unearthed some leftover stew from the refrigerator's depths, and warmed it on the stove. As I ate, the wind began its prelude, rattling the windows intermittently, insignificant tremors before the main event. The tempest descended around 9, perhaps 10. Rain hammered the roof in sheets. Lightning tore open the sky, each flash etching the yard, stable, corral, shed, onto my vision in stark, ephemeral detail. The ensuing thunder vibrated through the very walls. A prickle of unease surfaced, born mostly of the profound darkness pressing in from outside. Seeking distraction, I fiddled with the ancient television, coaxing only a snowstorm of static from most channels, a ghostly image from one local station. Defeated, I surrendered to the idea of sleep. In the bathroom, brushing my teeth, the lights flickered, a common symptom of the aging power lines, I reasoned. Finished, I moved towards the guest room. En route, a casual glance through the living room window, a check on the horses weathering the storm. And then, a searing flash illuminated the scene for a heartbeat. Stable, corral fence, tool shed, its lone bulb blazed, a stark eye glowing against the tumultuous night. I turned that light off. The certainty was cold, absolute. A hollow opened in my gut. Perhaps a mistake, I argued with myself. A lapse in memory? But the distinct click of the switch echoed in my mind. Still, I grasped for mundane explanations. Anything but intrusion. From the hall closet, I retrieved a stiff, bright yellow raincoat, smelling faintly of neglect. Pulling it on, I located an old flashlight whose batteries felt weak but functional. Outside, the porch lights hummed beneath a sky weeping furiously. Wind flung rain into my face as I pulled the hood tight, tucking the flashlight under my arm. Gravel crunched beneath my boots on the path to the shed. Rain lashed my eyes, forcing blinks. The flashlight beam danced erratically with each gust. In moments of clarity, I saw water sluicing down the stable walls. The horses were sheltered within. Only the roar of rain and the guttural rumble of thunder filled the air. Another lightning flare. The shed bulb flickered violently, then extinguished. By the time I reached the door, darkness had reclaimed it. My hand reached for the familiar handle, then stopped. The padlock wasn't there. My flashlight beam darted downwards, finding the brass sentinel lying intact on the muddy ground beside the chain. Not broken, not even unlocked, just there. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I tested the door, unlatched. Pushing it inward slowly, I swept the weak light across the interior. First, the switch on the wall, flipped up in the on position, yet the bulb remained stubbornly dark. A faint aroma of damp earth and something else, something organic, perhaps, filled the small space. Leaks in the roof wept onto the concrete floor. Tools hung in their ordained places. Shovels, rakes, shears. An old wheelbarrow slumped in a corner. I took a hesitant step inside, my boots squeaking on the wet surface. Nothing seemed disturbed. The light beam crawled over shelves laden with paint cans and dusty boxes. Nothing missing. Was it possible I'd fumbled the lock, made some ridiculous error? Then I heard it, a sharp, ragged intake of breath, heavy, stifled, like someone fighting a cough. It originated from the far corner, shrouded in deeper shadow. I froze, mind scrambling. What now? Clearing my throat, I managed a shaky, "Hello?" The sound felt absurdly small, swallowed by the dripping water. Silence answered, save for the rhythmic plink of water on concrete. I directed the flashlight beam towards the sound's origin. It illuminated a patch of floor, warped wooden pallets leaning against the wall, more grimy boxes. No person, perhaps an animal seeking refuge. But that breath, it felt undeniably human. My hands trembled, the hairs on my neck prickled. Retreating towards the doorway, I kept the light fixed on that corner. Another sound, perhaps a second breath, perhaps merely the wind sighing through a crack. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my temples. No movement detected. A few more backward steps, and I was outside the shed again. I slammed the door, fumbled with the chain, wrapping it around the handle. Fingers clumsy with adrenaline, I managed to re-secure the padlock. Then I ran, stumbling on the slick ground, back towards the house's fragile sanctuary. Inside, I bolted the door, and feeling foolish but terrified, dragged an old dining chair to wedge beneath the knob. I stood there for a long time, listening to the storm rage, replaying that single chilling breath. Someone had been in there. Why hadn't they answered? Why take nothing? Sleep offered little refuge that night. Each thunderclap was a physical blow, jolting me awake. Eventually, exhaustion must have claimed me, because the next awareness was sunlight striping the floor through the curtain gaps. I sat up, stiff and gritty-eyed. Dressing quickly, I ventured outside. The storm had scoured the world clean, leaving puddles shimmering everywhere. The horses stood placidly by the fence line. I walked to the tool shed. In the benign morning light, it looked utterly ordinary. The padlock gleamed, securely fastened. I worked the combination, opened the door, and scanned the interior. Nothing amiss. Tools hung undisturbed. The floor remained damp, but revealed no footprints, no sign of forced entry. The light bulb, still dark. I flicked the switch. It sputtered, flickered, then burned steady. Standing there, scrutinizing every shadow, every object, I felt a profound disconnect. If someone had sheltered there, they were spectral, leaving no trace. Shaking my head, I locked it up tight once more and turned to my chores. Late morning found me needing assistance with shifting feed sacks. Silas had mentioned a caretaker on the adjacent property, Old Man Hemlock, who might lend a hand. I followed the dirt track towards his small cabin, an old pickup resting nearby. Hemlock emerged, a man etched by perhaps 60-odd years, grey-haired, with a bushy mustache and a noticeable limp. After introductions, I broached the subject of shed break-ins, asking if he knew of any trouble. He gave me a peculiar look, eyebrows arching, gaze dropping to the dirt at his feet. When I pressed, he just shook his head, making a vague, dismissive gesture with his hand. "No," he stated flatly. "No trouble round here." He swiftly changed the subject, inquiring about the hay bales. My attempts to circle back were deftly parried, so I let it drop, the silence hanging heavy with unspoken things. The remainder of the day unfolded peacefully. I mucked out the stable, rearranged supplies, tended to the horses. The clear weather brought a measure of calm, yet the previous night's events gnawed at me. I tried to rationalize it, frayed nerves, an echo of my own breathing in the confined space, a momentary lapse with the lock, but the certainty remained. I had locked it. I had switched off that light. I resolved to perform an exhaustive security check before darkness fell again. That evening, every latch, every bolt was verified. I visited the tool shed a final time, confirmed the light was off, and yanked the padlock until my knuckles whitened, assuring myself of its integrity. Horses fed, house secured, I ate a simple sandwich and tried the television again. The reception had improved slightly. An old black and white film flickered to life. I watched distractedly, one ear tuned to the night beyond the walls. Weariness eventually drew me to bed. Around midnight, a sound pulled me from shallow sleep, a muffled scraping, distinctly external. I lay rigid, listening intently. The wind was still, no branches scraped the house siding. Rising silently, flashlight in hand, I crept to the window. The moon cast long shadows across the yard, but nothing moved. Then, a faint clank, metal on metal. My heart resumed its frantic drumming. Boots pulled on, breath held, I eased the front door open. No raincoat this time. Stealth was paramount. The yard lay bathed in cool moonlight. Stable, fences, all appeared undisturbed. The scraping resumed, closer now, emanating from the shed's direction. I moved off the porch, footsteps deliberate, agonizingly loud on the gravel. Moonlight was my only guide. The flashlight remained off. The noise intensified, a metallic rattling, the sound of a chain being manipulated. Then, abruptly, silence. Crouching behind the stable's corner, I strained my ears. Nothing but the thrum of my own blood. Peering around the edge, I saw the shed, dark and silent. The padlock hung from the hasp, seemingly secure. I waited, motionless, for a full minute, maybe longer. A sudden gust of cold air raised goosebumps on my arms. After another minute of profound stillness, devoid of footsteps or movement, courage failed me. The thought of opening that door again in the dark was paralyzing. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the shed, then turned and retreated hastily to the house. Door locked, chair wedged, I crawled into bed, though sleep remained elusive. Every creak of the old house was amplified, suspect. Morning inspection revealed the familiar. Shed locked tight, padlock intact, no sign of disturbance inside. The feeling of teetering on the edge of reason intensified. Later, I made one more attempt with Hemlock, probing about local law, strange happenings. He cut me off sharply, stating he didn't hold with talk like that. Had there been thefts? Odd incidents? He sighed, a plume of breath in the cool air, muttering that folks saw things in the dark, especially alone. "Keep an eye on the shed," he advised gruffly, "but don't fret yourself unduly. Cold comfort." I endured several more nights. Each followed the same ritual. Secure the shed, lock the house, check the horses, listen. Minor night sounds occasionally surfaced, rustlings, snaps, but whether animal or wind I couldn't discern. The shed light never reappeared autonomously, nor did the lock betray its post again. Yet the sensation persisted, a palpable awareness, a feeling of being observed whenever I neared that simple timber building. Silas returned at the week's end. I recounted the strange noises, the inexplicable light. He merely nodded, his expression unreadable. He'd had his own odd moments out here over the years, he admitted, offering no further detail. I didn't press. Even now, recalling that week tightens a knot in my stomach. The breath in the darkness remains unexplained, an acoustic phantom. The light, the lock on the ground, unresolved anomalies. Hemlock's cagey silence felt like complicity in some hidden narrative. A transient seeking shelter, faulty wiring playing tricks, perhaps. All I carry with certainty is the profound discomfort that settled over me on that property, a disquietude that resurfaces with the rumble of thunder, the memory of a ragged gasp in a dark, dripping shed, forever bound to the rattle of storm-shaken windows in the dead of night. Curiosity, threaded with a peculiar tightness in my chest, drew me onto that forsaken patch of countryside. The land lay tangled and wild, the house itself a weather-scoured husk against the indifferent sky, its porch listed precariously, the window panes opaque with years of settled dust. My purpose here was academic, chasing phantom details for a historical study on settlement patterns, ghosts of habitation long dissolved. I remember the silence as I killed the engine of my pickup, a profound quiet broken only by the sibilant rustle of wind through sere grasses. Decades, it felt, had passed since any human tread disturbed this soil. My boots crunched first toward the barn, its timber siding bleached gray and splintered by time. Within, shadows clung thick and damp. A scatter of fractured tools lay abandoned in one corner. The air hung heavy with the scent of mildew and spectral hay. Cobwebs draped every beam like macabre bunting. I lingered only briefly, my focus already shifting, seeking tangible traces of vanished lives across the wider property. A notebook and a compact camera were my instruments, meant to capture evidence. The barn yielded nothing but a profound sense of dereliction. Next, the house beckoned, yet something else snagged my attention before I reached its threshold. Tucked behind the main structure, near a somber clutch of trees, lay a circular anomaly obscured by planks of rotting wood. These boards, cracked and stained the color of old bruises, radiated a damp chill I could smell even yards away. Closer inspection revealed a stone well, its rim fashioned from meticulously stacked rocks, dark with age and furred with moss in emerald patches. The covering planks looked tossed there, a careless afterthought against the intrusion of animals or falling debris. An inexplicable magnetism pulled me toward it. Leaning cautiously, I tried to glimpse the interior through the warped gaps, but only impenetrable darkness met my gaze. The odor emanating from that aperture was stale, frigid, less a smell rising than a cold breath exhaled from the earth's depths. I resolved to clear the opening. My crowbar found purchase beneath one plank's edge. With a levering grunt, the wood fractured with startling ease. I set the piece aside. One by one they yielded until the well's open mouth gaped at the sky. Water, I'd expected. Instead, only a void, seemingly bottomless, confronted me. A small stone, plucked from the surrounding dirt, vanished into the abyss. I listened, anticipating the splash. What returned was not the sound of impact, but something akin to a faint, sibilant whisper. Initially, I dismissed it, the stone glancing off unseen walls. Yet the resonance was wrong, the pitch peculiar. It felt like speech, muffled and distant, the words themselves lost in the deep. Confusion held me motionless. I cleared my throat, a small sharp sound in the stillness. An echo returned, yes, but warped, subtly altered, as if the sound waves themselves were being reshaped into nascent syllables. A crawl of ice traced its path up my spine. Again, I leaned over the stone lip, peering fruitlessly into the black. I tried another sound, tapping the crowbar sharply against the mossy rim. The echo followed, delayed, but twisted, a guttural mimicry attempting to replicate the metallic chime. Not mere reflection, an attempt. My mouth turned to dust. Acoustic anomaly, I told myself. Some trick of the well's geometry, yet the sheer wrongness of it prickled beneath my skin. I tossed a second stone. This time, a soft susurration answered, almost articulate. Straining, I tried to decipher it, but the sound dissolved back into silence. Enough. The house awaited, and the day was waning. Inside, the air hung thick and motionless. The main room housed spectral furniture, draped in shrouds of dust-laden sheeting. Floorboards groaned underfoot, like old bones complaining. Doors opened onto a kitchen of rusted metal carcasses, and stairs ascending into gloom. Neglect was absolute. Floors filmed with grime, corners festooned with intricate webs. Yet the well remained, an insistent presence at the edge of my thoughts. I attempted to focus on my notes, sketching layouts, jotting observations. But each pause found my mind drifting back to those unsettling resonances. As dusk began to bleed across the landscape, I conceded defeat for the day and decided to make camp. My truck held a sleeping bag. Old houses held little fear for me, usually. I found a relatively clear corner in the living room, away from the sightless windows, and lit a small battery lantern, its glow carving a fragile haven in the encroaching dark. A dry sandwich, a swallow of water, sustenance, not comfort. Fatigue weighed on me, but relaxation remained elusive. A persistent urge tugged at me. Go back, look again into the well, but I sternly pushed it down. Morning would suffice. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and restless. Midnight or thereabouts. A sound jolted me awake, the distinct crunch of footsteps on the gravel path outside. An animal, perhaps? Gripping a heavy flashlight, I rose and moved to the front door, easing it open. The night was absolute, the sky a starless shroud of cloud. Nothing stirred in the yard, yet the sound repeated, faint, deliberate, near the house's flank. I crept along the wall, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating the skeletal barn, the derelict fence line, the stark silhouettes of trees. Then, again, the crunching footfalls, closer now, originating near the well. Slowly, cautiously, I advanced, the short hairs on my arms erect, my own heartbeat a frantic drum drowning out lesser sounds. I swept the light towards the well. The stacked stones gleamed damply. The discarded boards lay where I'd left them. And then, a voice, soft yet unnervingly clear, seeming to rise directly from the black opening. It spoke my name, Elias. The sound was distorted, fractured, like a whisper forced through a broken speaker, yet unmistakably my name. I froze, veins turning to ice water. Imagination, surely. Fatigue playing tricks. But it spoke again. Elias, the syllables strained, echoing strangely as if filtered through immense distance or time. The nape of my neck tingled violently. Driven by a horrified compulsion, I stepped to the very edge, directing the flashlight beam downwards. The light penetrated mere feet before the Stygian dark swallowed it whole. No bottom visible. I waited, listening intently. Silence returned, broken only by the sighing wind and the ragged sound of my own breathing. My hands trembled. Backing away, I sought rational explanations. Echoes, wind currents. But hearing my own name, that felt viscerally wrong, a violation. I retreated to the house, bolting the door, a futile gesture against something so intangible. Hours passed in the lantern-lit room, listening, waiting. Dawn was a gray smear in the sky before exhaustion finally claimed me. Morning brought resolve, but also a gnawing, obsessive need to understand. My research felt trivial now, compared to the enigma of the well. Perhaps some hidden chamber, some bizarre geological formation creating these acoustic illusions. After a Spartan breakfast of dried fruit, I stepped back out into the pale sunlight. Everything looked deceptively ordinary. The well was just a stone-ringed hole, open to the day. The warped boards lay nearby, still damp. Leaning over, I called down. "Hello?" My voice returned, faint, diminished, a simple echo this time. No name. Relief warred with a strange disappointment. From the truck, I retrieved a length of sturdy rope. Securing one end to a solid fence post, I tested its hold repeatedly. The plan, half-formed and reckless, was to lower myself just slightly, scan the upper walls for ledges, openings, anything unusual. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I looped the rope securely around my waist and eased myself over the stone rim. The interior walls were slick, cold to the touch, the stacked stones slimy with unseen moisture. I descended a few feet, flashlight beam probing the oppressive dark. Nothing but more darkness unfurled below. The air tasted of trapped earth, ancient and undisturbed. I tapped the walls tentatively, listening. The sounds echoed, flat and normal. No strange mimicry answered. Suspended there, a profound unease gripped me. My arms, taut with tension, began to shake. I scrambled back up, hauling myself over the edge, collapsing onto the grass, breathing hard. The previous night's experience felt both vivid and dreamlike. Had I truly heard my name, whispered from that abyss? Or was my mind, isolated and primed for the unusual, playing tricks? The certainty felt chillingly real. The remainder of the day was spent in a half-hearted search for records, for any scrap of paper that might shed light on this place. House, attic, barn. I sifted through layers of dust and decay. A few brittle ledgers surfaced in the attic, their entries sparse, water-stained, offering no mention of a well, let alone a haunted one. The work was a distraction, yet my gaze kept drifting towards the windows, towards the silent circle of stone outside. The well dominated my thoughts. As afternoon bled towards evening, A restless energy consumed me. Each recollection of that distorted voice sent my heart racing. Sundown found me seated on the front porch steps, flashlight resting beside me, waiting. For what, I couldn't say. Part of me craved the return of the footsteps, a chance to confront whatever lurked. Another part prayed for absolute silence. For hours, the night offered only the chirr of unseen insects. Then near midnight, it began. Slow, measured steps crunching on the gravel near the well. I rose, flashlight beam trembling in my grip, and walked towards the sound. Sweeping the light across the area revealed nothing. The moment I drew close, the steps ceased. My breathing grew shallow, palms slick with sweat. At the well's edge once more, I peered down. "Is anybody there?" I whispered, the words feeling foolishly inadequate. The echo returned, fragmented, indistinct. I waited, straining my eyes against the impenetrable black. Then, a sound from within, a low, guttural murmur, followed by a faint scraping, like stone dragging against stone, far below. Leaning further, my foot skidded on loose gravel near the rim. I steadied myself with a hand pressed flat on the cold, damp stone. My heart felt like a trapped bird beating against my ribs. The voice spoke again. "Elias." Closer this time, the distortion less pronounced, but still chillingly unnatural. It resonated not just in my ears, but deep within my bones. The syllables of my name drawn out, intimate. The fine hairs on my neck bristled. A full-body tremor seized me. Words failed me. I stood rooted, breath catching in my throat, trying to reconcile the impossible sound. "Elias," it repeated, the final S elongated into a low, sibilant hiss. A soft scuffling followed, like hesitant feet on stone deep within the earth. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, betrayed me. The flashlight slipped, clattered against the stone lip, and tumbled into the void. It struck something partway down. A brief, tumbling glimmer illuminated rough-hewn walls, then vanished. The thought of retrieving it, of lowering myself into that darkness after it, flickered, irrational, desperate. My instincts screamed against it, blind, exposed, leaning over that moor. Then I saw them, faint impressions in the damp earth near the well's perimeter. Footprints, shaped like ordinary shoes, yet impossible to date definitively. The ground, softened by recent dampness, made them look disturbingly fresh. A dull ache started behind my eyes. A leaden weight settled in my stomach. This defied logic. The property was deserted. I was alone. Another scrape echoed from the depths, stone on stone. A pause, then a whisper, too faint to decipher, yet carrying the distinct inflection of a question, or perhaps a command. A strange compulsion arose, a magnetic pull towards the opening. My feet shifted, edging closer without conscious thought. I found myself leaning again, drawn towards the stone gullet. With a surge of will, I recoiled, stumbling back. Staying out here was madness. I fled to the house, slammed the door, shot the bolt. The rest of the night passed with my back pressed against the cool plaster of the living room wall, clutching a spare flashlight and a heavy hammer scavenged from the barn. Footsteps resumed outside, circling the well, pausing, resuming, an endless patient patrol around that stone ring. When the first tentative fingers of dawn probed the darkness, I ventured onto the porch. The air was cool, mist clinging low to the ground like a shroud. Fresh footprints, glistening with dew, marked a clear circuit around the well. My stomach clenched. Departure was imperative. Yet, a stubborn fragment of my researcher's mind, or perhaps something darker, urged me to stay. Just one more day, to seek some sliver of understanding. To simply walk away felt like leaving a sentence unfinished. That day became a series of tentative approaches to the well. I spoke into its depths, tapped the stones, dropped pebbles. Sometimes silence answered. Other times, faint, indistinct murmurs drifted up, but my name remained unspoken in the daylight hours. That night, the footsteps returned. I remained inside, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, listening to the relentless circling. Pauses, movement. Once, a low, resonant hum seemed to emanate from the well itself. A vibration felt more than heard. Peering through a grimy window pane revealed only darkness. Sleep, eventually, was less a surrender than a collapse. Sunrise solidified my decision. I gathered my notes, packed my gear with trembling hands. One final pilgrimage to the well. The discarded boards lay undisturbed. I peered into the abyss one last time. The darkness offered no parting sign, no final whisper. It was utterly, profoundly silent. Yet a familiar chill traced its way up my arms. I backed away deliberately. Reaching the truck, I started the engine, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. I drove away from that decaying homestead, leaving the stone well to its secrets. What resided in that earthen throat, I cannot say. I possess only the memory of the sounds, the unnerving sensations. Even now, safe in the mundane world, the recollection of my name, distorted and ancient, echoing from the dark, raises gooseflesh on my skin. No explanation satisfies. There is only the lingering image of that deep, waiting pit, and the chilling certainty that something down there had looked back. I have never returned, yet sometimes, in the dead quiet of the night, I fancy I hear a faint, fractured echo. Elias, a spectral reminder of the empty stone well, patiently waiting in the dark. The final summons for spirits hung unanswered in the vaulted quiet of the bar, my own voice a ghost in the vastness. 3 years I'd poured libations within the time-worn walls of the Serpent's Coil, yet never had a Friday night bled out into such stark emptiness. Wiping down the mahogany counter, a ritual worn smooth by repetition, I couldn't dislodge a prickling sense of wrongness. Perhaps it was the tempest clawing at the windows, a symphony of wind and percussive rain, or perhaps merely the mind, left too long alone in the echoing hush, weaving phantoms from the gloom. Regardless, each tick of the clock was a step closer to the blessed turn of the key, the locking of the door, the retreat into the storm-lashed night. My name is Ilara, mixologist, confidant by trade, and tonight, sole custodian of this deserted haven. Even the proprietor, a man usually tethered to his till, had succumbed to the weather's fury, leaving me with the stark edict, midnight closure, absolute. Above the ranked bottles, the archaic timepiece measured out the minutes, each swing of its pendulum a drawn-out breath. Glasses gleamed, spirits stood marshaled, the floorboards sighed clean beneath my soles. Nothing remained but the vigil. A jagged spear of lightning momentarily bleached the world beyond the glass, chased by a thunderclap that rattled the very bones of the building. I flinched, the tumbler in my hand nearly escaping my grasp. Steady, Ilara. I admonished the tremor in my wrist, only the sky falling. Then, a sound beneath the storm's roar, a dry, furtive scrape. Faint, yet undeniable. I held my breath, listening past the drumming deluge on the roof. Again, it emanated from the rear, near the shadowed maw of the storage room. "Is anyone there?" The question emerged thin, frayed with an apprehension I despised. "We're closed now." Only the storm answered, until, distinct and chilling, footfalls. Measured, unhurried, advancing. Panic surged, a cold tide. My eyes darted, seeking improvisation. A weapon. A heavy, unopened bottle of small-batch rye settled into my grip, its weight a meager comfort as I sidled towards the bar's end. "I have a weapon," I declared, the lie tasting brittle on my tongue. "And the authorities are alerted." The steps ceased. Silence descended again, thick with the storm's fury and the frantic pulse in my ears. Then, a voice, rough-edged like rusted iron. "No, they are not." From the deeper darkness near the storeroom, a shape coalesced. Tall, silhouette broad, beneath a sodden dark coat, hood drawn low to obscure the face. He moved with a liquid, unsettling poise, each footfall deliberate, soundless now on the worn floorboards. I said, "We're closed," I reiterated, knuckles stark white around the rye bottle's neck. "You need to go." A low chuckle answered, devoid of warmth, sending icicles down my spine. "Ah, but I think not. I think perhaps you'll pour me one final measure." He drifted into the flickering wash of the old neon sign illuminating the back bar. A fleeting impression of his face, eyes like polished obsidian, fixed on mine with an unnerving intensity. But it was the smile that truly disturbed, stretched unnaturally wide, hinting at too many teeth, the expression of a hunter assessing its quarry. "Look," I began, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "I don't want problems. The cash drawer, take it. Just leave. I won't report anything, promise." He laughed again, a soft exhalation of amusement, and slid onto a stool with effortless grace. "Money holds no interest for me, Ilara. I seek something considerably more precious." Hearing my name spoken by this phantom sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. My gaze flickered towards the heavy oak door, calculating the impossible distance. As if perceiving the thought, his smile deepened fractionally. "A poor notion," he murmured. "Now, about that drink?" Instinct, honed by years behind the bar, briefly eclipsed the terror. "Your preference?" "Intrigue me," he replied, his gaze unwavering, pinning me in place. My hands, betraying me with a fine tremor, relinquished the rye bottle and reached for a heavy crystal tumbler. My thoughts raced, scrambling for an escape, a strategy. The phone lay inert in my pocket, an impossible lifeline. Distraction, perhaps. I defaulted to a sazerac, the intricate ritual a temporary anchor, the precise measure of absinthe, the swirl, the sugar cube, the bitters, familiar motions that steadied my hands, if not the frantic beating of my heart. While I worked, I ventured, forcing lightness into my tone. "So, frequent this establishment often?" A smirk touched his lips. He saw the flimsy gambit. A first visit, truth be told, though I've observed this place, observed you. The air grew colder. Me? Why? Because you are significant, Ilara. He leaned slightly forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. You possess something I require. I slid the completed cocktail across the polished wood, maintaining the distance. Listen, I just tend bar. There's nothing valuable about me. Oh, but there is, he countered softly. You simply haven't grasped it yet. As his hand closed around the glass, his sleeve hitched upwards, exposing a symbol tattooed onto the skin of his wrist, an intricate knot of interlocking circles, cradling what looked disturbingly like an eye, an emblem that felt inherently wrong, ancient and unsettling. He noted my stare, that unnerving smile blooming again. Intrigued? Excellent. Intrigue is the gateway. Gateway to what? The question escaped before I could censor it. He savored a sip of the Sazerac, nodding slowly. To awareness, to perceiving the world beneath the veneer. Wonderful, I thought grimly. Not merely a menacing intruder, but one draped in cryptic pronouncements. This needed resolution. Now. Look, I stated, injecting steel into my voice. Whatever you imagine I have, you're mistaken. The bar closed 10 minutes past. I must insist you leave. His expression shuttered, the thin veil of civility dissolving. I am departing nowhere, Ilara, nor are you, not until my purpose here is fulfilled. And what purpose is that? I demanded, anger momentarily eclipsing fear. In response, he reached inside his coat, producing not a weapon, but a small, exquisitely crafted box. Fashioned from a wood dark as midnight, its surface was intricately carved with sigils echoing the tattoo on his wrist. As he placed it gently on the bar top, a faint, sibilant whisper seemed to curl from within its confines, audible even over the storm. Within this vessel, he said, his voice low, resonant, lies a key attuned to a specific resonance, a potential you carry, Ilara, acknowledged or not. I stared at the object, a profound dread settling over me. One part of me screamed to snatch it, to flee. Another urged me to shatter it against the wall. Instead, I met his intense gaze. I don't understand you, I insisted. I don't have any potential. I'm ordinary. He shook his head, a flicker of something like pity in his dark eyes. Ah, Ilara, ordinary has never been your truth. Why else the persistent feeling of being out of step? The flashes of knowing before the event? The murmurs you hear in the quiet hours of this old place? The ones no one else perceives? I recoiled, stumbling back a step. The whispers. How could he know? I'd buried that secret deep, convinced it was frayed nerves, imagination. Yet this stranger laid bare the hidden corners of my own mind. What? Who are you? I breathed. His smile returned, tinged now with a strange melancholy. I am Silas, a custodian, tasked with preserving equilibrium between this reality and the currents that flow alongside it. And you, Ilara, are a threshold walker. You possess the innate ability to unlock passages best left sealed, or to secure them against intrusion forever. As he spoke, The very air in the serpent's coil seemed to thicken, growing heavy, charged. The shadows in the room deepened, stretching like grasping fingers, and the whispers, always dismissed, surged, becoming a chorus of indistinct, urgent voices. "This isn't real," I protested, the words tasting like ash, knowing even as I spoke the depth of the lie. Somewhere within, a core I'd long ignored resonated with his impossible claim. "It is reality unveiled," Silas said softly, "and the time has come to claim your place. Open the box, Ilara. Accept the key. Accept yourself." My gaze fell upon the box, then lifted back to Silas. I stood poised on an unseen edge. One path led back to the familiar rhythm of pouring drinks, pretending the whispers were wind. The other plunged into an unknown, perilous territory. But as the susurrus of voices reached a fever pitch, as the shadows seemed to coalesce around us, the choice felt less like a decision and more like an inevitability. With a hand that shook violently, I reached out. The moment my fingertips brushed the carved wood, a palpable shock, not of electricity, but of pure energy, surged through me. The lid sprang open, revealing not metal, but a key forged of solidified luminescence. As I lifted it, the familiar contours of the bar warped, reality shimmering, tearing like old silk to reveal fleeting vistas of other realms, other ages. Silas, the custodian, nodded, a look of profound gravity on his face. "Thus it commences," he murmured, his voice seeming to echo from a great distance. I clutched the radiant key, its power a living current within me. Whatever lay ahead, whatever trials this new existence held, the life I knew had dissolved. The serpent's coil, my sanctuary and prison, faded into mist. My former self, the bartender Ilara, became a memory. A different path unfolded, daunting and unknown, yet one I somehow recognized as the journey I had unknowingly been preparing for all along.